Hi, Dr. Lamb.
Good afternoon. How are you?
Sal.
I'm just excited. I can't hardly stand it. I just got in. We had our top two candidates on campus today I'm on a search committee for curriculum and instruction, and we had those two ladies on campus today, and been kind of a whirlwind day, but they taught a couple of lessons on literacy. It was really good. I enjoyed it. So I'm hoping that we can get one of them hired. They won't be working with me or us, but always when we're shorthanded, some of my folks end up filling in, and so hopefully we'll get somebody hired. We don't mind filling in, but we got plenty to do on our own. Hey, Maggie. Yeah. Okay. Okay. All right. Is it 6 o'clock yet?
Two minutes.
All right. I think it's time to go. Good evening. Welcome everybody to MELS 603. I hope your holiday went well last week. You had a week without having to see me, so it was a good week just because of that. But we're back tonight for our third case study. I believe Amanda, Brittany, Tara, and Tiffany get to go first tonight. Am I correct in that? All right, so we'll get there in just a minute. I'll do a couple of housekeeping things. I'll go ahead and share my screen. We got a couple of housekeeping items that we need to do here. So as always, let's look at our weekly schedule. According to our weekly schedule, we should be about through with our OMA. So let's make sure that we kind of wrap that up by Sunday or Monday, because we need to look at, for the last week, we'll do content and then you'll have your last Zoom coming up. But for that last week, we need to switch over to TaskStream and look and see what we got to do over there. So let's look at TaskStream right quick. As you know, the OMA is due in your DRF portfolio this summer. And you've also got a School of Ed disposition, and that's it. Just go in and rate yourself dispositionally, how you think you're doing. on your dispositional behaviors and your OMA. It's all that's due in your DRF portfolio. Now, also during that last week, you need to pay attention to your web folio. No, I'll submit later. So I'll just come down to one of mine here and make sure that you're keeping up with your artifacts. Now remember, this is, yes, you got to turn it in 605. It has to be uploaded into your DRF portfolio for grading, but it's just a pass fail. But the big thing is this is really helpful in getting a job. I'll just tell you, they don't want to read your evidence work. They like a synopsis of it, but well, they like seeing that this video, this portfolio. That's your calling card. See, the good thing about it is the way that we develop it and let you build your own, just using our template, is you can publish and share a link to yours with somebody and they can see all the artifacts that you have. Remember to try to follow along this template right here that says for communication, one from the app cell, one SIOP, one open-ended. You know what those are. So go ahead and make sure that if you haven't started, finish up your OMA. It take you 30 seconds to do your dispositions because there's just 10 of them and you grade yourself. And then, you want to be putting some of these artifacts that we've generated this summer in your competency folio. So does anybody have any questions? Please don't put your summer internship log in your DRF and submit it. That's for all 5 at the end of your program. Your internship log for this summer goes here. Move that out of the way. It goes here in your competency folio, and you can request comments from me on it. Remember, when you put something in to request comments, now please remember, when you request comments, if you're going to come in here and say you're going to add 5 things, add all 5 of them, then click the request comment button, tell me where those 5 are, and then request comments. If you do it one at a time, I get all those different emails. So I prefer if you're going to put 3 or 4 in, request comments at one time on all 3, 4, or 5 of them. That way it gets confusing sometimes, and sometimes if you send them one at a time, it's hard for me to access them. But if they're all in there together, it seems to work better. I don't mind getting the emails, but it seems to work better if you send more than 2 or 3 emails at one time. Sometimes it kind of locks up on us. So remember to go ahead and do that in your last week. Finish out your OMA. Everything seems to be going really well. Everybody's work is good. I think you're getting great scores on your OMA. So I don't have any complaints on that. Anybody have any questions on the OMA, what your responsibility is in task stream? Again, you need to put your artifacts in your competency folio. And again, for your DRF portfolio, let me go to author for fall 21. Again, you just owe me the OMA and your dispositions. Those dispositions are very easy. Again, you click on that, complete this form. There's only 10 of them. You just tell us where you are on learner development, learning differences, learning environments, content knowledge, application of content, assessment, planning for instruction, instructional strategies, professional learning and ethical practice, and leadership and collaboration. Now you ought to be at exceeds on professional learning and ethical practice, because that's what we've been doing all summer. And leadership and collaboration, you've been collaborating for the first time to produce a product. So you ought to be exceeds on that. Assessment, you ought to be exceeds on that. The rest of these, you kind of are different places. You'll really get a lot of this other stuff in 6.0 when you get to 6.04. When you get to learner development, learning difference, learning environments, content knowledge, that's all 6.04 stuff. Application of content, planning for instruction, that's 6.04. Instructional strategies, that's 6.04. But the things that you ought to be about as good as you're going to get on are assessment, because you had that in 6.02 and 6.01. Professional learning and ethical practice, leadership and collaboration. You ought to be about there on those. That's just a rule of thumb. So those are the things to make sure that you get done. Now, just as a reminder, let me get out of that. Oh, I shouldn't have stopped my share. Okay. As always, when you get out of that. Always when you come out, even for just for a minute, always make sure you log out of task stream. Now, under interviewing materials in our class shell, I've got the link. Next Monday at 6 o'clock, I'm going to be doing the summer interviewing session. You can come, it's not a requirement. And here are all the materials that I'll be covering. I'll be explaining these. If you're planning to interview anytime soon, it would be an hour of your time well spent. I'll go through all these materials and about the 4 types of interviews that you can expect to get an assistant principal job. So I will be doing that, as I said, and here's the link. Monday, the 18th at 6 p.m. It'll last from 6 to 7. I'm pretty good at staying on time. So if you'd like to come to the interviewing session, I'd love for you to come. You can learn how to, if you can't come, start with the 4 types of AP interviews, and I'll explain the first, second, and third, fourth interviews. And here are the materials. Here's my overall, my top 10 for any interview. 5 questions you should never ask. 5 things, and one of the 5 things obviously is your resume, but your portfolio sample of your work, that's your competency folio. You can send it as a link. A 2-page evidence summary, you can summarize your evidences, what you've done. 4 types of interviews, performance data task kind of questions you get asked in a virtual interview. The first interview, second one is always a group interview, how to answer group interview questions because you've got civilians in there. Third interview will be principal led. 4th will be with your superintendent or area superintendent. And so I'll go through all these materials next Monday. All right. Anybody have any questions about that? Stop my share. All right. We're ready for our first presentation of the evening. Amanda, Brittany, Tara, and Tiffany, take it away on Jimmy and Willie, and we are normal too.
Okay, go ahead, Brittany, you're on there.
Okay, yeah, I can see it good. All right, so the first thing that we looked at was chapter 5, students' rights in the principal's quick reference guide to school law. And there are a couple of different court cases that are related to this case. The courts have affirmed that students' free speech rights are protected by the Constitution as long as they do not present a clear and present danger or threaten a disruption of the education process. So in the event that the student activities do threaten the operation of the school, principals can limit or ban the student activities. Another court case states that there is a tension between the school's need to maintain an orderly environment and the student's right as a citizen and human being. So yes, they are entitled to having the freedom of speech as long as they are not disrupting the education of others. Additionally, another court case that's more recent that happened in 2011, the court said that schools permit the advocacy of rights of homosexual students, but they cannot silence the views of students who hold a different view. So while you have to respect the students who may be homosexual or other sexual orientations, you also cannot silence other students if they have differing views, as long as they are not threatening.
Okay, so according to our principal's quick reference book, we talked about the heckler's veto, and student speech cannot be suppressed for a sole reason someone may be offended or create an outburst in response to the speech. Also in the book, the heckler's veto takes away the rights of a speaker and gives greater power to anyone who may be offended by the speech. And that is on page 135. Another thing to remember is our 14th Amendment, they're ratified in 1868. The 14th Amendment guarantees all citizens equal protection of the laws. And lastly, we want to remember FERPA is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. That's the federal law that protects the privacy of students' education records. And the law applies to all schools that receive funds under an applicable program of the U.S. Department of Education.
And so as far as it goes back to the study, we have an excerpt of the study there. And Oliver Wendell Holmes says the clear and present danger doctrine, as declared in the Gitlow versus New York, it states that speech loss its First Amendment protection when it conflicts with other important social interests. Even proponents of full protection, the full protection theory of freedom of speech, set limits on speech. For example, obscene telephone calls, threatening gestures, disruptive heckling, and sit-ins have been classified as actions rather than protected expression. And so in answering the questions, and I'll cover question 1 and 2, based on the definition of veiled threat, I believe that Mary Lou's comments were a veiled threat when she meets with the students and parents to discuss the boys' relationship. She expresses her concerns for the boys in regards to other students and community members' comments and actions towards the boys. She reminds the boys that graduation is soon approaching and believes they should refrain from expressing their feelings about one another until then. Although she does not mention a punishment if the boys do not refrain from expressing their feelings, she is clear in multiple meetings how she feels. Mary Lou's responsibilities under the law are to protect all students' rights to freedom of speech and protect the education of all students. The boys' relationship is causing a disruption in education. The boys are allowed to express their rights of homosexuality, but other students are allowed to express their opposing points of view. Answering number 3, Mary Lou should respond to the concerns of Jerry and Cindy Hudson by explaining that she has the responsibility to protect the rights of all students. She can acknowledge their concerns, but remind them their students will be held accountable for their actions if they disrupt learning. Based on the law, Mary Lou has to protect the rights of all students. Not allowing Jimmy and Willie to attend prom together would mean she is not protecting their rights. In regards to showing public signs of affection, the boys should be punished in the same manner as anyone else based on the school student handbook.
All right, so here we're talking about bullying and cyberbullying, and the district policies should have something included in the board policy about dealing with students that are being bullied or cyberbullying. I'm not going to read all of this verbatim, but of course we do know what bullying is, or should know what bullying is. It's the intent to harm another person or a group. It has to be shown as being repeated, like repeated behavior towards that individual or that group. School environments become hostile when bullying occurs. And then the cyberbullying is a form of bullying that carries out using electronic communication, using words through text messages, photo or video sharing, and our websites. and abusing the powers through bullying. North Carolina does have anti-bullying laws covered off campus. So whether it occurs on campus, on a school device, away from school, outside of school, the school is still responsible for dealing with it if it is brought to the school's attention. I can think of a case, thinking of an incident that happened a couple years ago at my school personally, where we had this issue and the child ended up having to be put into the hospital. And we did not know about it until the child was actually there, because the child never told us. But once we knew, we had to take full responsibility on what was occurring in our classrooms. And so that was our first time as a school truly dealing with the cyberbullying portion of how rude kids can be to one another. And then of course it goes into the misdemeanors, the class misdemeanors, if the defendant is 18 years or older, and what offenses they can have. And then it has examples of behavior that constitute bullying or harassments, disrespect, threats, virtual taunts, name calling, put downs, and just being physical, and the threats and assault towards another person. Okay, and then some ethical and legal concerns. When we think about ethical, not supporting rights of all students, the board's relationship was never a concern until they were seen holding hands and kissing. And then the mental health support that may go along with that. And then the legal part of it is to supporting the First Amendment rights of all of our students, preventing the loss of education due to a student actions, and then unfortunately the lack of mental health support that we do find within our schools here in North Carolina.
Okay, some of the things that we said that we would like more clarity on to really figure out exactly what this principal needs to do in regards to the situation is what the student handbook or student policy, school policy says about public displays of affection amongst students. Obviously, whether it's the boys showing public display of affection or another couple, they should all be treated equally or punished equally. Also, is there something in the student handbook or school policy that bans homosexuality, since those parents were so adamant about not allowing the boys to be together, especially at prom? And that kind of led to our next question, like, is this a private, charter, or public school? I'm not really sure what the rules are in regards to like private or charter schools in regards to like their student handbooks, if they can be more strict or lenient. Limiting that kind of stuff, but just some more information about that because of the excerpt below with Jerry and Cindy Hudson, who said that they would boycott the school, and they'd already collected signatures on a petition, and it said something about like their religion. So what exactly does the student handbook or school policy say?
Sorry. So to wrap everything up, we talked about Mary Lou cannot share personal information about Jimmy and Willie with the concerned parents due to the FERPA laws that we talked about earlier. Mary Lou must protect Jimmy and Willie's rights to free speech as well as the other students. She cannot prevent free speech because she is worried about what another student believes in, or will say as they right to the freedom of speech as well. Mary Lou can punish the boys for public display of affection based on the student code of conduct, and Mary Lou must ensure she protects all students' rights equally under the 14th Amendment. And that is the end of our presentation.
Very good. Everything was going good till you got to slide 13, and then we had a wreck. So let's go back to slide 13. All right. There is no missing info. You should know that. There is no, let me be clear, there is no missing info in this case. All right. Is there something in the student handbook that mentions public display of affection? What is the overall handbook that we go by? That state manual, remember? There's a state manual of infractions. Does it not have a public display of affection? That is against the rules everywhere. You should know that by now. You know, if you had a question, always go back and refer to the state manual on what an infraction is. Now, the district sets what the punishment is. The state sets what the infraction is. This is not acceptable in school. So yes, there will be something in the handbook or school policy about public display of affection. Has to be. So that's the first one. Second one, is there something that bans homosexuality? Can a handbook ban homosexuality? No, cannot. It can just ban public display or same-sex affection or something, but it can't ban you from being a homosexual. Can't do that. And then the third one, and this is one that concerns me the most. Is this a private charter or a public school? Does it matter? No. By the way, a charter school is a public school. But one of the things you got to remember is your rights don't stop at the schoolhouse door. What law would a private school not have to follow? They have to follow the same laws as everybody else. Now, they might bluff you into trying to believe that they can do something that they can't do, but they can't. And they know they can. 14th Amendment is everybody's right as a citizen. Can't abridge that. All these other cases, this is case law all the way top and bottom. Private schools cannot do any more to you than a public school can do, because these are your rights under the Constitution and under state law. State bullying law doesn't just say that, this only applies to public schools, applies to all schools. State law, federal law applies to all. Title IX, if you take federal money, you'll lose that money. But law applies regardless of what type of school it is. That's the thing to remember here, is that if you're in a charter school, same as public school, private school, in this particular case with these laws, doesn't matter whether it's a private, a public, or a charter. A handbook cannot ban homosexuality. It is not against the law. And so a school can't ban it because it's not against the law. And we know that the state handbook says that public display of affection is, in fact, a inappropriate behavior, a UB, unacceptable behavior. We know that that is the case. All right, so now let's break it down a little bit further. You can stop your share, but great job on these things. So let's break it down a little bit here.
Dr. Lamb, I have a quick question.
Yes.
I just want to make sure I heard you right. So you said that the state mandates the infractions, but the school districts decide the punishment?
The school board adopts the code of conduct that has either a level or a tier system of what the punishment is, the consequence. But the state sets what the infractions are. Let's go back and look at that. Let me share my screen. The state does not prescribe what you do to a kid consequence-wise. However, they do prescribe what the infractions are. So let's see where that put it.
So that could look different from district to district.
It does look different from district to district. Everybody's code of conduct is going to look different. Everybody's, in terms of what they do with the kid. The state doesn't prescribe that. So here it is. And so when we get to the back here, right here, the excessive display of affection, right there it is in the first block. It's a UB, as I told you. Right here, this is preschool. All the different things that could be in there. Here's regular school, reporting categories, assault, again, reportable crimes. And then here are the behavior types. indecent liberty, sexual assault, kidnapping, disorderly, harassment, aggressive.
Dr. Lamb, how does one right supersede another right? Like if you're talking about a Catholic school, if they're overall it says that you have to leave, then how does that infract on a different right?
Let me get to Catholic school in just 1 second.
Okay.
Because I didn't say anything about church schools. Yet, but I'm going to. Mutual sexual contact. Sexual assault, sexual offense, kidnapping, alcohol, disorderly, fighting, extortion, hazing, aggressive, honor code, fire alarm, truancy, dress code, insubordination, falsification, inappropriate items at school, disruptive assault, burning of school building, sale, unauthorized area, disrespect, excessive. There you go. This is for K-12. We already looked at the preschool one, but right here again, you don't see any. If they do this, you get that. This just defines it. Now, if we go to, and here are all they are. I mean, as you can see, there's a lot of stuff. But now, what we do is, we go to the district's code of conduct, which is adopted by the Board of Education. Now, what it says is, all right, right down the line, if you do this, this is what we'll do. The local sets the punishment. Got 3 tiers in CMS. And here we go, right here. If any of these things happen, under the general heading of attendance, all these things right here, this is what we're going to do. Food and beverages, student dress, medication, personal property, misrepresentation, we already know, which is cheating, falsification of that thing. We've already been through all of that with, with Bobby. Insubordination, bullying, cyberbullying, profanity, obscenity. Here are the things that, here that is. Here are the things you can't do. But remember, the state says these things are bad. You cannot do them in our school. Now, the local says this is what you get if you do that. But the state has the authority to say this is not acceptable in our school. Generally disruptive behavior, trespassing, unsafe actions, vehicle use, gambling, vandalism, use of fire, theft, breaking and entering, robbery, extortion, unauthorized use of tech, pornographic, profane, violent materials, harassment, sexual, inappropriate items, counterfeit, false alarm, bomb threat, aggressive physical, verbal action, fighting, UB, threatening, communicating, assault on student, all these different things here. Disorderly sexual behavior, here we go. Offensive touching, harassment, all those different things, mutual sexual contact, excessive display of affection. It tells you what your response is as an administrator. It gives you the range so that you won't get hit with arbitrary and capricious. So remember again, the state says you can't do this, but it's up to local to say, this is what your consequence is. Okay, and so there has to be something in your handbook in North and South Carolina, pretty much across the country, that says you can't do excessive display of affection. So let's stay on that theme for a minute. Where the principal where'd this thing go bad from the very beginning? When Jimmy and Willie started doing excessive displays of affection, that's what got everybody riled up to start with. Whether it's boys, girls, or boy, girl, we can't allow that stuff in school because it never ends well. It gets everybody all cranked up. One of the things that I used to have to, to explain to boys, especially in middle and junior high school, is boys are stupid. I had to explain this to girls. Boys are stupid. If they think, if they see you allowing Russell to do something with them that's inappropriate, then the problem is I think I get a turn too, because boys are stupid. And you can't let any boy, you can't say, well, I like Russell, but I don't like Cam. And so it can't be, it's okay for Russell to do something inappropriate, but oh, I'm gonna complain or tell on Cam. What you have to convince girls is it's inappropriate, and you have to convince everybody these are inappropriate actions for young people in school. You can't do this here. Now, if you do it to movie on Friday night, that's on your parents, but you can't do that stuff here. And so the principal and the administrative team let this thing get out of control by letting a little thing become a big thing. And this one got completely out of control, did it not? I mean, the parents went crazy in the community, and it started out with something as simple as Jimmy and Willie quit it. If you don't, the first time we're going to tell you, don't do this. We don't care that you're the same. It's not about same sex. We don't act this way. We don't hold hands and kiss in school. That's where this thing got sideways, is inappropriate display of affection that was not handled at all. And then it just got out of control and incited the entire community. So that's the first thing. And what is that term called again that I've talked about a dozen times this semester? Antecedent behaviors. And again, what does that mean? Little things become the big things. If you have excessive display of affection, pretty soon you have touching, and then pretty soon you have some of those sexual, the big ones that have that PD in front of them, that persistently dangerous, that threaten your job, that you're going to have to get it, you're going to lose your house over, because you're going to get fired if you make that persistently dangerous list. I'm just going to tell you, that'll be the end of it. And so this case goes bad from the beginning when, lack of action on the administrative team's part, and a little thing became a big thing. So that's the thing. FERPA, can we talk to Cindy and Jerry about somebody else's kid? No, we can't do that. We can hear them out over their complaints, but we have to remind them that we have to uphold the rights of all children. We can't talk about somebody else's kid. They wouldn't appreciate us talking about their child to somebody else. So we have to make sure. Now, bail threat, heckler's veto. So basically what the principal said is, you can't come to the prom. I worry if you come to the prom, they'll do something bad to you. Well, then go tell the people who's going to do something bad. You can't abridge somebody's rights. You can't let somebody shout you down from your rights because somebody else might misbehave. And she did say what she did say was a veiled threat under heckler's veto. And so we can't allow the loudest and the stupidest to run things. And that's basically what happens here. So we've covered all those things. Now, an important question, and this is really a question. You brought this point out early in your presentation, that the law says that people are free also to express their views opposing Jimmy and Willie's view of homosexuality. How do you do that without bullying, though? Is my question. I really don't know. I mean, that's a tough one. Now, we're not asking everybody to say, stand up and affirm or pledge that what Jimmy and Willie is doing is okay. We're not asking anybody to do that. So we have to be real careful under this notion that people can hold opposing views. They can hold their views, they just can't act upon those views by beating up Jimmy or Willie or putting them in the locker or a trash can or things of that nature. That's the piece we got to be careful of. As they say, but it's my right to oppose homosexuality. It is, but you can't do that opposition here at school. You can't act. You can't abridge Jimmy and Willie's right by asserting yours. Again, that's what we're talking about here. We have to be careful. Now, church schools. Church schools are a different category. Church schools, basically what you're doing is you're supposed to be a member of that congregation, and basically what you do when you do that, you sign away any rights that you might have. And that's the notion when they, I know how Catholic school works. They have the parents come in and sign all these things that they will or won't do. That's how they get away with what they do in church schools. Catholic school's not the only one that does that, but you're voluntarily surrendering your rights in order to go to school there. It's not a public school. If you want to go to school there, then you have to voluntarily surrender your 14th Amendment right and several others, your civil rights, any other that they prescribe for you to do. Now, I had an intern a few years, and I have some at Catholic schools now, but I had one at Catholic Church, shall remain nameless, in South Charlotte. And the list of things that they had to renounce and the rights that they had to give up were scary. It really was. And basically what they gave up is even if something bad happens to your child, you can't say or do anything to us or tell anybody about it, or you have no recourse. And I was like, whoa, this is really far out there. Basically, they were saying, we have no right to protect your child here. If something bad happens to your child, that's just, you chose to come here. Too bad, too sad. And I was like, wow, that's really tough there. But that's the way they do business. And there are people who want that, and they're willing to take that risk for their children. I can't fault them if that's their belief system. But please understand that when you go into church schools, most of them, they have all these waivers where you waive your rights. Now, that doesn't happen in private schools because they take federal money, especially like for exceptional children. And it certainly can't happen in a public or a charter school. So my former next door neighbors, they decided that they wanted their children to go to South Lake Christian, just out the road from us there on 73, just as you get out toward the county line going out of Mecklenburg, out near the dam for Lake Norman there. So they sent their two children out they were in public school for a good many years, but then they sent them to South Lake Christian School. And one of the things that I was always amazed about folks who got into that, and South Lake's a good school. I'm not being facetious or not being ugly here, but I was out there one night. Taylor was playing on the football team. He's a really good player, and they had a really good little private school team. And I said to Phil, we were sitting there in the stands watching the game. I said, Phil, it's amazing to me. If you sent your child to a public school who was this disorganized and the facilities were this bad, you'd be ranting and raving and wanting the principal fired tomorrow. And who you're over here paying the kind of money that you're paying, about $20,000 a year per student, for them to come here to South Lake. And I hadn't heard a peep out of you that the scoreboard doesn't work. The field doesn't have any grass on it. You don't have any public safety officers here. You don't have an ambulance here. If a kid gets hurt, you'll have to put them in a car and take them to the hospital. What would you be doing if you went to a public school was this poorly run, that you weren't even having to pay? So what I'm saying is, parents for private schools, for that elite to be away and not have to sit next to the other, they will give up rights, they will pay, they will do crazy things, but you will not get that passed in public schools or charter schools, or even a lot of some private schools. You won't get that pass. But those church schools kind of get a pass until something goes bad. They had a kid break his leg at the football game. The next week after I was there, he broke his leg at the football game. They had to put him in a car and take him to the hospital. They ended up getting sued. And then they found out when they sued that the headmaster and the principal of the school had embezzled over $8 million. That's why everything was run down. Nobody bothered to ask. You can Google it. South Lake Christian Academy, Huntersville, North Carolina. You can Google all the financial trouble. And I was like, Phil, it didn't make sense. Y'all paying $20,000 a year per kid to go to school here, and their facilities are the worst I've ever seen. Everything here, they're not paying for anything. Where's your money going? But people who will go to church schools will put up with things that they would never put up with in public school. Mismanagement, facilities, give up their rights. Now, that's their right to do that. But you will not get that pass in public school or charter school. You will not get that pass. They'll be on you if you come. I mean, it was just pitiful. I mean, their ball field didn't have a bit of grass on it. It was just dirt. Scoreboard didn't work. No ambulance. No security there. No nothing. It was, and the trash was still there from last week's ball game. But that was just an outward sign that maybe you ought to rethink this thing. But that's what they wanted for their children. So church schools are a little different. Well, actually, they're a lot different. But other than that, it won't matter whether that's private, charter, or public. You don't sign away your rights to door. You do that in Christian schools or church affiliated schools. That's how they get away with that. All right. Excellent presentation. All right. The other two groups, it's a toss up. Whoever can tell me I want to go next, can go. So Sarah says she's going. All right. So Sarah and Maggie, Russell, Cam.
Yes, sir.
Hit it.
All right. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, we can.
All right, this is case study 3. We are normal 2, Maggie, Russell, myself, and Sarah. The issue at hand, we kind of just went over this, but I'll do it one more time. School staff found 2 male students who were in a romantic relationship. They were caught basically with PDA in the school library. Opposition to this relationship was expressed through phone calls, letters, emails with the principal. One parent meeting got especially heated and led to even a petition being started by the parents, and also some of the students, I think, were even petitioning as well. The 2 boys decided they wanted to attend prom together. The principal began to be fearful that there could be issues with the students, even with their own personal health. Students were upset, parents were upset, so things were heated. The principal met with the students and the parents to try to convince them to wait until after graduation to continue their relationship and dissuade them from attending prom. Instead of being deterred, the parents saw this as a threat, a veiled threat, the comments that were made by the principal, and the students decided that they needed to deal with this issue by creating some school activities to help educate students on race, class, gender identity, sexual orientation, etc., like Day of Diversity, Day of Silence, and a Gay Straight Alliance Club. And I'm trying to go to the next slide, and it's not going. Wonderful. There we go. Oop, oop. And we're here. All right.
Okay. So I look for some connections to help kind of answer maybe how the principal should have responded through connections to chapter 5. So I think this was something similar that the previous group used, the quote from page 121, but basically talking about so long as, back one, Cam.
I don't know what's happening over here. I'm pressing and it's making a weird noise.
Yeah.
Is it sharing? Is it changing for you guys? Because it's making a weird noise for me.
It's making the noise, but it's not changing. So you can probably get out of presentation view, and it might be easier.
All right. Does that work?
Yeah, I mean, I can see it. So, so similar quote, but basically that students' free speech, it is protected by the Constitution as long as it doesn't present a clear and present danger. So, according to this, the principal may have, oh, sorry, I kind of skipping there. In the event that students' activities threaten the effective operation of the school, principals are given clear authority to limit or ban students' activities. So my thought was, according to this, the principal may have the authority to limit or ban some of the boys' activities that they're proposing to do. in response to the principal's reaction if their behavior could present a clear and present danger or cause disruption at the school, such as I thought about the silent lunch protest. I think there's a good argument that that would be a disruption to the learning environment if the kids didn't speak all day, although the teachers might love that, but that could be a disruption to the learning environment. So possibly the principal could prevent that from happening. However, then this goes into the heckler's veto rule, which again, we talked about, but the right that we shouldn't be responding just with the fact that maybe someone who might be offended or might respond, loudly or cause a disruption, someone might respond. So according to the heckler's veto, the principal should not ban them from going to the prom just because there might be a response, and should not prevent them from forming the club, the Gay Straight Alliance Club or whatever, just because some loud people may disagree with their behavior or their beliefs. And then finally, on my end, in reference to the freedom of assembly, similar thing that a school that, kind of two sides, a school that allows students to gather, this is from page 140 in chapter 5, that allows students to gather even peacefully whenever they want, may not be able to function efficiently or effectively. On the other hand, we do need to allow students adequate time for them to meet and discuss relevant issues. So because based on that, the principal could be justified again and maybe not allowing the day of silence, but should allow them to form a club and maybe allow them to meet after school or at a correct time, and that would be an appropriate response.
I think that's a great point, Maggie. That repeat that one again. That's a great point right there.
Just kind of measuring out, the disruption level that the day of silence would be disruptive and could be argued as that.
Yes. But not their
should-
club.
Right, not the club.
Yeah.
And that I like in that the end of that quote on page 140, that if we discourage that, that is actually preventing students' options of learning about good citizenship, that we're preventing them of exercising their right, their First Amendment right, in a healthy way.
All right, on to question 1. Would you consider Mary Lou's comments a veiled threat? So Mary Lou was attempting to make accommodations for everyone except the 2 people who needed her the most at the time. So, you have, although the PDA was not right, you have 2 kids who are probably nervous, maybe even afraid for what's going on at their school and outside in the community, because they've been probably publicly outed as gay for the first time, at least within the school. And instead of the principal kind of dealing with this and telling them, I'm going to try to do my best to make this a safe learning environment for you, we're going to get through this together, the principal asked them to censor themselves until after graduation, which poses a threat to them being able to live their truth, by making the statement that their actions, which were the PDA and attending the prom, subjected them to harm from classmates. Mary Lou was attempting to instill fear as a tactic to control the students, which could definitely be viewed as threatening behavior by an authority figure. And then I put this quote down here: wishing to avoid negative publicity, that was mentioned in the case study, which to me was like a selfish response to parent pressure by Mary Lou. I feel like she just wanted to, as quickly as possible, get the heat off of her back from parents and students alike. So as opposed to putting these 2 kids' safety or mental health first, she just wanted to avoid that negative publicity as quick as she could by responding the way she did. And the last thing I put in here was the PDA policy. It was mentioned before, but I thought that instead of this veiled threat of, you could come under harm when it comes to at least the PDA, instead of telling the 2 boys they were subjecting themselves to harm from the PDA, like we spoke about before, she could have easily, instead of saying that weird threatening statement, this cited the handbook or cited the rules, cited the law. She could have avoided the entire thing just by mentioning that. And and so the kids, honestly, when they said that they refused to stop their public displays of affection, they were being defiant to the principal there.
Absolutely.
So she could have at least nipped that one aspect of it, maybe not the prom piece, a little more complicated, but the PDA she could have nipped in the bud right away just by citing policy.
That is correct.
All right. So I'll take question 2 here. What were her responsibilities under the law? And so in this case here, of course, we've talked about speech being protected by the Constitution as long as there's not a clear and present danger or any disruption to the educational process. And I think we've touched on a couple of these cases, Get Low versus New York, in which the court did conclude that there is no clear and present danger. Just some backstory to Get Low is just basically you had a government official basically who was making threats towards the state government, in which those types of speech aren't considered protections under the Constitution, all right, because they technically pose a threat to somebody wanting to overthrow the government in some type of way. So in that case, you know, even though he has a right to free speech, that particular free speech is not protected because of what it could possibly do to the government. And then in Tinker versus Desmond, you had a situation here where students wanted to protest the Vietnam War in some form or fashion. They decided that they wanted to wear patches. So the district heard of these plans prior to it happening and decided that they were going to ban any types of protests in which students were wearing armbands to protest the war. Well, you know, students were suspended and they basically followed up the different levels of the court. And then a decision came where it was overturned, basically citing school officials must not censor students unless a reasonable prediction can be made that a disruption in school activity or rights of others are invaded. So in this case, students wearing armbands didn't necessarily present any danger or cause any disruption to educational activities that will cause the principal of the district to be able to censor those students. And just in this case here, I think for Mary Lou, in terms of her responsibility, I think the uncomfortability is not a disruption to the educational process. And she has a responsibility to ensure every student has the freedom to express themselves as long as it does not disrupt school activities. The expression does not cause a hazard to the health, safety, and is not disruptive to other students. Unsubstantiated fear or apprehension of disturbance are not sufficient grounds to restrict the right to freedom of expression. It should not be basis for development of standards. For that one. All right, Cam, you can go on to the next one.
Okay, so I had the next question, question number 3. How did Mary Lou respond to the concerns of Jerry and Cindy Hudson? We talked about FERPA a little bit already in the laws that she is not legally allowed to discuss other students with them. And Mary Lou could simply say that exclusion would be a direct OCR violation. So we looked a little bit at the Office of Civil Rights and how it applies to the situation. So the mission of the U.S. Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights is to ensure equal access to education and to promote educational excellence through vigorous enforcement of civil rights laws to protect all students from unlawful discrimination and harassment based on color, race, national origin, sex, disability, and age. This includes students who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, questioning, asexual, intersex, non-binary, and individuals who identify their sexual orientation or gender identity in other ways. And then in so doing so, bullying, harassment, exclusion from school activities, which in this case would be the prom, and other forms of discrimination can interfere with these students' access to a safe and inclusive school environment. And federal law, however, requires schools to ensure that these students and other students have equal access to all aspects of schools, programs, and activities. So in saying so, we felt like this was a direct OCR violation by basically telling them that they could not attend prom, or if they did, that there may be repercussions from other students. And you can go to the next one, Cam.
Just a point before you go, sorry, me, sir. Please remember that the OCR report comes out of Power School now. So we have to report all this stuff. Remember that from our manual, our state manual. That is now embedded in what we do, the OCR report and compliance. So we can't avoid that. It's federal law. Sorry, Sarah.
All right. So in question 4, should Mary Lou allow Jimmy and Willie to attend prom? So of course the answer here is definitely yes. Any denial would be against the law. All right. And one of the cases I did come across here that basically talked about prom dates and being denied due to homosexual relationship. Now this was a U.S. District Court case out of Rhode Island, Frick versus Lynch, in which basically Aaron Frick requested to bring a male date to the prom and was denied by his principal, citing possible real and present threat, physical harm to Frick and his date. Now the courts ruled that the threats of physical violence gave homophobic students an unconstitutional heckler's veto, which of course we've talked about, the acceptance of restrictions of speech due to reactions of opponents of speech. And Principal Lynch's decision failed to meet the O'Brien case, in which requires the least restrictive alternative before limiting speech. So basically what the court said was the principal could have took other measures in terms of increasing security, chaperones at the event, which gave alternates without just basically denying others the right to attend based on possibly physical violence or some other type of uproar from others in attendance. All right, so in this case, if Mary Lou denies Jimmy and Willie from attending the prom, would be a direct OCR violation and will warrant an investigation if a complaint is filed. In this case, the least restrictive alternative would be to increase security measures if fear of violence was a legitimate concern.
So now we're going to talk about addressing bullying and cyberbullying. So some proactive actions to prevent possible bullying might include: do not tolerate any lewd, indecent, or offensive language by students or parents, especially towards another student. Educate students on the proper use of social media and cyberbullying. Educate all students and staff on what is appropriate physical contact at school, and address incidences immediately and appropriately, including with these 2 young men, and then take any and all student threats or concerns seriously and address them immediately. So if something is said or done, it needs to be taken as a threat and not ignored, because even something very simple or small in our minds might lead to something more serious down the road. So everything needs to be taken seriously.
All right, and just to kind of wrap things up in terms of legal and ethical concerns. All right, we kind of touched on the 4 paradigms here: justice, care, critique, and profession. The first one, in justice, both Jimmy and Willie were both being treated unfairly by the school and the community. By other people being able to cause an uproar due to their beliefs or their feelings in terms of what they feel in terms of relationships. And then in terms of care, as an administrator, Mary Lou's responsibility to encourage the boys to be true to themselves and not allow outside influences to guide her into trying to censor the boys. In terms of critique, Mary Lou has allowed many individuals in the community to have too much power over her decision making and seems to really have clouded her judgment in the handling of this incident. And then lastly, profession. As a principal, part of Mary Lou's job is to promote academic and social success. This is only can be done by being an advocate for all your students. All right, so I think that's it.
All right. Excellent presentation. I had again, this is federal law. You can't escape it. The Office of Civil Rights enforces Title IX and the Civil Rights Act of 65. I had a student and who was one county over from Asheville, which in Haywood. Maggie's one this side in Henderson, and Sarah's up in, where are you, Sarah? You in Surrey or Stokes?
Yadkin.
Pardon?
Yadkin County.
Yadkin. All right. So some of these more rural areas, I had a student from Haywood who said, well, I would ban them from going to prom. I said, but you do realize that, you know, you're going to get killed in court and you're going to lose your house. She said, oh, they'll never convict me in Haywood County. And that's when I had to remind her, the case won't be heard in Haywood County. It'll be heard in Asheville in federal court. The case wouldn't be heard in Henderson County, or wouldn't be heard in Yadkin. For Yadkin, it'd be heard in Winston-Salem in federal court. See, that's the thing you've got to remember is, when you violate federal law, you go to federal court. The locals won't save you. There's this notion out there that, oh, in our part of the world, in our county, in our town, we don't put up with that, and they won't convict me. It won't be in your county or in your town. It's going to go to federal court, and you're going to lose your house. You may lose your freedom as well. So you got to remember that we're talking about federal law. Federal law doesn't stop whether if you're a private or a charter public. The only time federal law stops is if you're a church affiliated school and you say this is part of our beliefs, and the people expressly waive their rights and they don't take any federal money. If they take federal money, they can't even do that. So that, again, that church school is a misnomer to start with. It's not really school. It's just church. And so you got to understand that church schools are technically are not really schools. They're just church. But a school can't do these things. Doesn't matter whether they're private, public, charter, does not matter, because this is federal law we're talking about here. Excellent presentation. Loved a couple of your points there. Again, that notion that you can't punish the victim. We go back to Sarah's ball players. We're gonna double jeopardy them. We're gonna give them a punishment, and we're gonna take away their ball game. No, that's too much. That's capricious. In this case, heckler's veto is very capricious, because we're punishing the innocent. We're punishing the victim by saying these people are gonna do this bad stuff to you, so we're gonna take your rights away. No, can't work that way. We have to be consistent. Again, we have to remember what those standards of arbitrary and capricious are. All right, we're ready for our last group. And by the way, make sure that you say a prayer for Kaylee, our classmate. She lost her grandfather up in Massachusetts. And so if you can remember her in prayer.
Thank you, Dr. Lamb. Are you guys able to see the presentation? All right, so
Yes.
Santana and I are going to try to bring it together for you tonight. As he said, Kaylee is at a family funeral in Massachusetts. She did add some things to this presentation for us, so we're going to try to do her justice and share her thoughts with you as well. So the way that we kind of put it together is the first couple of slides are just going to be reflections on the 4 questions that we've gone over already. So even though the principal did not technically outright threaten the boys, she didn't say that if you go to the prom or if you stay in your relationship, this is going to happen. She tried to push off a perceived restriction of their relationship. So she was trying to keep it from escalating and becoming a disruption. But in doing so, she infringed on their First Amendment rights because she was not letting them have their choice. So the principal at all times must uphold the individual rights of your student, even if it may upset a larger group of students or parents. You can't let the loud ones get their way and do what they say just to try to keep them quiet. So these students are protected under the 14th Amendment. They have equal protection rights, and the First Amendment, their freedom of speech and association. Above all, she should have immediately contacted her superintendent and the school's attorney for guidance on what to do to make sure she was following the law, to make sure she can suggest these things to students, or if she needs to kind of keep her mouth shut before she kind of digs a hole. The Equal Access Act says that schools cannot deny equal access or discriminate against any group of students based on their religious, political, or any other content. So at the end of the day, as an administrator, you have to leave your personal opinions at the door and look at the law. What does the law say to do? What does your code of conduct say to do? You can't discipline someone on what you think they should be doing. You have to look at what your governing processes are. So the other groups have spoken on Tinker versus Des Moines, in that stated that school officials cannot censor student expression unless they can reasonably predict that there is going to be a substantial disruption or there'll be some interference in the school activities or invade the rights of other students. And like we've talked about FERPA, talking about the other parents, you can't talk to other parents about students. You have to respect their privacy for their family and those students as well. Again, the boys can't be restricted from attending the prom just because other groups or students may threaten to protest, may feel uncomfortable. You can't negate the rights of one to appease another, and that's the Tinker standard. And then also, again, heckler's veto, the loud people get their way. This would apply if the Hudson's complaints were taken to heart and it caused the boys to be excluded. That would be the heckler's veto. But as long as that doesn't happen, then they followed the correct protocol. All right, Santana. Oh no, this is me, I'm sorry. Moving forward. So just looking ahead at what could have been done and how they should kind of move forward. The boys proposed coordinating diversity education days to help the lack of understanding that they perceive from their peers and community. So legally, they can't be denied those requests if there's not a policy or a law that prohibits it. Some states do have prohibitive laws for student assemblies, so you would have to make sure that your state allows it. And I like the point that was made earlier that the day of silence could become a disruption. I didn't even think of that, but that made perfect sense, that you would look at, does the assembly cause a problem or would it help the situation? So prior to the boys being seen displaying their affection in the library, there was no concern raised until after other students, parents, or staff found out about the relationship. So that's kind of what started it. Initially, the principal reacted to try and appease the objection of the Hudsons. She tried to censor the students by asking that they wait until after graduation to resume their relationship or to go about their diversity days or creating their club. She should have listened to the students about their feelings and beliefs before she came to a judgment on their behaviors. And above all, she has to provide due process and not and then infringe on their rights just to appease a louder group. All right, Santana.
Okay. So the legal connection. The First Amendment, it guarantees freedom of concerning religion, expression, assembly, and the right to petition. The Fifth Amendment, it protects the citizens from being compelled in any criminal cases to be a witness against themselves. So the Fifth Amendment will go back to like the process, the due process that the student should have had or when looking at the whole situation. So the 14th Amendment states that no state shall deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. The Civil Rights Act, it protects individuals' freedom of speech and harassment. When I looked at this one right here, like when the parents sent the email to them, there was a word that stuck out to me, and that could be kind of used as sexual harassment if the kids in the school were to say that word to those boys, call them names. The Family Educational Rights Privacy Act, the federal law that protects the privacy of the students' educational records. And the heckler's veto, which Meredith discussed, take away the right of the speaker and gives the greater power to anyone who may be offended by the speech or action. Okay, so bullying and cyberbullying. For the cyberbullying includes the takeaway, includes fake websites, profiles, posing as others and making false statements, and etc. So this goes along with the bullying and harassing. As used in this article, bullying or harassing behavior is any pattern or gestures or written, electronic, or verbal communications, or any physical act or any threatening communication that makes on school property or any other school sponsored function or on a school bus. According to the law, bullying is a reportable behavior. When staff and or students are informed of bullying, it must be reported to the administration. And you will use your code of conduct and the law that must be followed when addressing any form of bullying or cyberbullying. Many districts have anonymous reporting programs too.
Yeah, Stanley County uses See Something, Say Something. So there's an app for students to go in and report. And as soon as a report comes in, our school resource officer, principal, and assistant principal, guidance counselors are all notified immediately so that they can follow up with that student and address the situation quickly. And like the other group said earlier, these can be punishable as misdemeanor if you are above class 1, if you are above 18, and a class 2 if you are under the age of 18.
So for the summary, the role of the principal: to improve instruction and community spirit. The principal should give suggestions to the teachers for the improvement of the instruction. For justice, the policy pertaining to disciplinary action related to public display of affection on school property or during school sanctioned events must be fair and equal for all students, regardless of gender or sexual orientation. For care, the student suggests for Day of Diversity could create a safe, open space to discuss equity issues within the school culture for a variety of subpopulation represented at the school. For critique, human rights must be protected for all students. And profession promotes social justice and ensure that individual students' needs inform all aspects of schooling.
All right, I think that is ours. We kind of put it in a tight little nutshell.
Yeah, you did,
I
and
think
it's good.
I think overall, like you said last week, Dr. Lamb, was to look at it as not just specifically the sexual orientation piece, but for any protected population at your school. So
Excellent.
if it's an EC student, or if it's a gender issue, which I know gender is playing a big role. That's a big thing in our county and at my school personally. So you have to just be careful with any group, whether it be a racial thing, ethnicity, any of that. It's all going to pertain the same way.
It's all the same. And that was the point that I was, thank you, Meredith. That was my concluding point tonight. This case is not really, it's not about gay. It's about any protected class, fill in the blank, if the same laws apply. And so we have to be so careful with that. One of the things that I want to make sure that Santana was mentioning there toward the end, a point about being arbitrary. Now, if Jimmy and Willie are displaying inappropriate affection for one another, we should get them. But now, if boys and girls are, we should have already gotten them too. But we can get caught on the arbitrary piece if we let the boys and girls, we let them free for all, but then we get Jimmy and Willie. So we got to get, we got to be consistent. We got, equity. We can't be arbitrary or capricious. We have to enforce the rules consistently. Due process must be consistent. substance of it, and we must carry it out, the procedural piece, the same for everybody. We can't give the boys and girls a pass and get Jimmy and Willie. But again, this is not really about sexual orientation. This could be about anything. We have to know what people's rights are. We can't talk to other parents about somebody else's child. We can't let the loudest and stupidest shout us down. We can't let little things become big things. We can't abridge somebody's rights because it's convenient. We can't threaten them with veiled threats that, something bad's going to happen, so I'm going to take this away from you. We can't do that, whether it's, whether it's a gender or whether it's whatever the issue is. We can fill in the blank. My mother came to this country as a young child. People don't realize that the Irish were discriminated against in school. We, at different times, different people. Now you say, Dad, what are you talking about? When my mother came to this country, Irish, it was okay to discriminate against folks because of their, I guess that'd be an ethnicity. We've come a long way. We're trying to move back some, but we'll correct. But the notion here is different times, different people have been persecuted for different things. We have to run schools where everybody is welcome and everybody's rights are upheld. That's the notion of this case. Whether whether it's a gender, a race, an ethnicity, a religion, whatever it is, that group, we have to make sure we protect those rights. Final thoughts tonight from anybody. You're getting better every time. Now I'm gonna tell you, in 2 weeks when we have the last one, boy, that's a biggie. You're gonna have to dig, because it's about parents coming and complaining, but regular ed parents coming and complaining about an inclusion model. You really need to dig in and everything that pretty much that we've covered all semester long. Next week we'll have our last content session. Try to wrap up your OMA this week so that you can get to task stream. Is there anything that I've missed? Again, please remember Kaylee in your prayers. Is there anything else that I've missed for the good of the group tonight? See, the better you do on case studies, the quicker they go. We get out early tonight. I'll see y'all next week. Everybody be careful. Have a good week.